Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Next Stop Automation, the podcast where we talk to people from the logistics industry about wins, challenges, and the future of operations. Today with me is someone who has gained experience in several different industries with several different companies for quite some time, you could say. He helps companies specifically with the US market entry. William Cairns, welcome, first of all.
Konstantin, thank you very much. It's nice to meet you and welcome to your audience. Um, my company's name is Bill Cairns Management Group, which I had founded about 20 years ago. This is my 50th year in the healthcare industry and working with pharmaceutical companies, diagnostics companies, and medical device companies. I've spent the last 20 years looking for emerging technologies that I can bring into the U.S. market, which will help manufacturers improve their quality, make faster products in a more reliable way. At the same time, I've guided companies that have wanted to come into the U.S. market on how to deal with our culture, how to deal with our technology, and how to deal with our industry. And that has been a very rewarding and a very, very exciting experience for me and for the clients that we've worked with. So primarily, my clients more recently have been from Japan, from Germany and Switzerland and other European countries, and will continue to be a foothold for them as they are working their way into the market and stabilizing their position, being in the business.
That was quite some introduction, I would say. So next, let's dive a little bit deeper into the packaging industry, since you've worked in that with quite some companies, you could say. So over the 35 years of experience that you've collected on that field, how did the landscape change in terms of technology, regulation, and business models?
It's changed quite a bit. In terms of technology, over the last 20 years, machines have graduated from being electromechanical machines with very, very simple controls and very, very labor-intensive operations to manage. Over time, drives were made into servos, so there was more electrics brought in. PLCs were added to the machinery, giving more flexibility and faster output. And in parallel, we started to integrate robotics, something that was very expensive over the years, but now has become much more manageable, much more user-friendly. And frankly, it's been able to free up human resources away from monotonous and repetitive and sometimes dangerous activities to do something more value-added and let the robots take care of the simpler operations. From a regulatory standpoint, more so in the materials side of the business, where sustainability, recyclability has become a critical factor. Companies are going away from multi-layer materials to mono materials that are compatible for recycling. And also, we're seeing an incorporation of unique characteristics, color shifting inks, holographic labels, track and trace coding on equipment, 2D barcoding on containers. And from the regulatory side as well, the enforcement of stringent laws in different states in the U.S. to require materials to be recyclable and to be traceable. And that is going to continue over time.
Wow, that sounds like probably one of the major shift has happened in the past few years. That's impressive. Um, could you name some of your best case studies that you've guided along this way? And yeah, could you identify some patterns maybe about what these successful companies did to get where they are?
The first thing I encourage a company that wants to come to the U.S. is to do their own homework to get a little bit of a feel for the industry in comparison to the markets that they operate in already. There is definite differences in the culture, in how we regulate, and how we handle technology. The successes in the early stage of my business was with a company that had built very advanced inspection machinery, state of the art, first of its kind, which was going to ultimately replace a very monotonous and a very, very stressful inspection process.
Mhm.
We did the evaluation of the technology that it would meet the standards of the company. We had extensive material testing and evaluations of the technology. We invested heavily in reaching the industry through publications and trade shows, and essentially guided them through the process. I call it the BCM Group Way. It's a three-stage approach where we um, get comfortable with the market. The second is we get closer to the end users and become more practical in the field. And third is we form partnerships. And that's usually a 2 to 3 year process in the beginning.
That sounds insane. And I could imagine that that is potentially something that could go wrong along that process. And you probably also had to do your own learnings along this journey. That is quite unusual, I would say. So, would you mind sharing maybe some things that went wrong?
Okay, in certain companies, they may have come over here in the past and they were working under their own home country's web method of doing business, and they felt very discouraged or rejected, or they weren't very successful, and they went home kind of discouraged. Or they didn't want to come over here because a colleague or an associate was over here and they had a similar experience, and they said, "Oh no, you stay away from the market or be careful." But really, it really comes down to um, having a internal commitment by the management of the company that they are going to stay in this longer term. It always takes longer than you can plan. It's that way in all business, but in particular, moving into a new market. It's important that you really look closely at the regulatory requirements. And that also means different regulatory bodies in the U.S., whether it's FDA, USDA, and other organizations. They all have their unique requirements and standards that you need to be aware of. And do that homework up front. And the other things that are important would be making sure that you have a longer term plan that also includes sufficient funding and staffing to support the effort. Uh, Having a presence outside of the U.S. and supporting some critical technology used in the U.S. can be a little bit of a disadvantage if you don't have somebody close to the actual operation to support it. So having a presence in the U.S., whether it's temporary or long term, is really critical to making sure that the U.S. market and customers feel comfortable that they're going to get the support that they need. Americans are very demanding. Productions at very high speed. We allow ourselves very little margin for error. So support from the suppliers is a it's not even support anymore. It's almost a partnership in the sense that the working is done very closely, and that has led to linking of this equipment electronically to remote computers and monitoring systems that can help the supplier support the operation.
If there was a single thing that determines almost the success, the whole success of the US market entry for whatever company that might be, what would it be from your perspective?
The one thing I would say the knowledge of the market, the upfront homework I mentioned is probably the most important because you will be getting a feeling culturally how we operate, commercially how we expect to work with non-U.S. companies, and performance-wise, we'll give you all the information that you need to make sure that you meet our requirements, but you need to look into that in the beginning and make sure that you meet those requirements. It's going to be I do not advise you working in this area as an R&D project or an experimental as you go project. You have to do that homework up front.
That sounds like it's quite a major shift for a company to step in a new market, in a new culture, in a new environment. Have you uncovered some of probably the biggest misconceptions people, let's say from Asia, have when they step into the US market that they could fall into?
In those cases, I've found mostly it's been cultural differences on how we handle, say, service and aftermarket. Um, we have an urgency to our processes and our manufacturing. That means we need to have a close coupling. So, um, having resources several time zones away and several thousand miles away is a very significant factor in making a decision over here, whether a company is going to be successful or not. Initially, just getting a feel for the market and studying is very possible. But once you're in the business, you have to stay here in this market physically and support that operation. And with that comes an education in how we think, how we service, how we pay for things, and how we support things.
So it's actually far away from just registering in the US, the United States,
Yes.
opening a factory or a department or whatever there, and things just go. It is far away from that.
You have to be, it's a long-term commitment, and you have to think of it in a long-term commitment, not as not go along as you can until you become successful. You have to have a plan. It's important that you do an analysis of your strengths, your weaknesses, what kind of obstacles you might have, whether they're regulatory, financial, cultural, and also what are your strengths? What is it that you do that's better than anybody else? We, the American industry is very, very open to new technology. They look for it. It's just a
Mhm.
matter that they want to make sure that there is someone standing behind it for a long time to make sure it works properly.
Wow. I could imagine that there is actually some companies that maybe came to you that had to be disqualified by the kind of criteria that you have to meet. So what does a company that is ready for US market entry have to bring so you can successfully look at that next step?
Exceptional documentation of the technology or the product, a reference or experience on how that product or service is being used in the home market, and also what's good and what's bad, what has not worked in the home market, what do we need to be looking for, what do we need to be prepared to be reactive for if there's something that we're not aware of because it's a different culture, it's a different technology. So not only all the good, but also what do we have to take care of, and what do we have to be aware of, and what do we have to watch for.
Okay. Was there ever a case of resentment where I would say, so if I came to you and I said to you, look, I want to go into the US market, and you told me you're not ready for this, I would probably sit at home and do 24/7 working on solving that specific thing. So I'm going to be ready for that. Is there some specific case that you came across that did that exceptionally well?
Yes, a couple actually. Um, one was a company that built some very sophisticated machines used in pharmaceutical manufacturing that had come over, had established some business here, but then did not have continuity, did not stay with it, would come and go, treating it more as a kind of a hobby in a sense, and the customer can feel that. We can feel that type of sensation. So we went back, we sat down, we explained, this is a multi-month, multi-year process that you need to go through to bring them back into focus and to stay into focus. Um, Coming into this market and living with the market day to day or week to week is the very best way to achieve success. Coming in and dipping your toe in now and then again in 6 months or a year, you're going to find it very frustrating and very difficult. But there's been other companies that came in with excessively high pricing expectations because they look at the U.S. as a big market, and you had to sit down and give them a little education on what is a limit in terms of budgets, what are people willing to pay for certain things, not to do any negotiation, but just to give them a feel for where they need to be successful. And so
Mhm.
things like that. And the third was companies that came over and they hired people from their home country, not knowing our culture that well, and they didn't hire exactly the right person to carry the company's plans through. So we had to go back and re-educate them on what kind of employees that they should be looking for, what kind of training that employee should get, and what kind of support that employee should get.
Now, from your perspective over the years of experience, where do you see future opportunity, especially interesting for myself, who's looking to solve some kind of problem in that industry, as someone who brings technology and advancements to the logistics industry? Where do you see opportunities? Where can we expect major shifts and changes in the upcoming years?
I can see several areas where there's going to be change. One is, and again, going back to the packaging and packaging automation, we're calling it packaging as kind of a service where equipment is not purchased, it's leased or rented to the end user, and there is an agreement made with material suppliers so that there's no capitalization of the investment up front. It's all borne by the supplier, but with a long-term contract. From materials side, with the increased emphasis on sustainability and recyclability, that is going to continue, and that's going to continue even more so outside of the healthcare industry. But it's a major factor, and it can affect the type of packaging and the type of automation that is selected. And you need to pay attention to that in the beginning as you select your materials. And in terms of regulatory, over here, states are now starting to put very stringent regulations in place about recycling, and particularly California. And it's something that the material suppliers have to be aware of because of the requirements that they have will be quite stringent, and something that they can react to ahead of time, not after they're already in the market, but before they're in the market.
Makes sense so far. Is there something that has completely changed, completely shifted from the w- the the methodology or the art of your work being 10, 20 years ago to nowadays? Is there certain criteria that completely fall out or some others that maybe came up along the way?
Communication is advanced from writing letters to fax machines to FedEx to email. So one of the biggest effects I've seen has been the exchange of information, the expediency of replies and expectations by Americans and responses, um, and in terms of a complete understanding of what that communication has to be. It's totally different than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because operations are run on 24/7 schedules right now. People in the factories have much less time to do things themselves, to tweak and tune and adjust things. They really rely upon the vendor to be there, Johnny on the spot when they need them. So it's I'd say that relationship between the non-U.S. company and the American customer is probably the most critical one. That is almost a partnership.
Wow. I've heard that a couple times now that communication is such a major factor
Yeah.
that determines the long-term success about a business. Why do you think that is?
Pressures put on manufacturing to produce very high speeds, very reliably, minimizing scrap. I think it's really demands by the manufacturing operation to produce product, and I think also as I said, the plant level people, they're pulled in so many different directions right now. They don't have the luxury that they may have had 20 or 30 years ago to work with something continuously. They have to have somebody else from the outside that has answers for them, that can step in and help them right away. Otherwise, they may struggle. The problems may not get solved. So that, that communication on a day-to-day basis when you're getting started or when you're starting up a business is really very, very important because what you're doing is you're creating confidence and trust and credibility. And once you have those accomplished, then everything else can follow that. But you have to build that relations with the U.S. customer to make sure that they will work with you in the future and that it can be a successful relationship.
Wow. So these three key things are actually the things to focus on the most, especially when it comes to the market entry and the first years of establishment.
Yes.
Very interesting. How did um, that's that's a personal question now. How did it come that way that you actually chose to advise people or companies on how to prepare for this shift?
Before I started my business, I worked for companies offshore that some of them had not been in the U.S. before. So
Mhm.
I helped them get in. So I was doing this prior to for as employees of companies prior to my starting my own consulting business, and saw that it worked very well. And that was the genesis of BCM Group.
So basically, you did a good job and people referred you, and you saw that other companies demand your services as well. And this is the thing that you could probably deliver in a really good way.
It's important you have a good reputation in this industry. People are not going to wake up in the morning and say, geez, I want to go to the United States this week. It's a management decision that's been gestating in the mind for a long time. a lot of the most of the work I've done actually has been through referrals. People that knew me, people that know my reputation. It's not something that you go on the internet and go and hire somebody to do. It's you have to find somebody you can trust, somebody that you know knows what they're doing, and somebody that's reliable and work with you. And that's human relations. And that's communication.
Of course. Is it actually a one-man show? Are you the business or are there other people involved?
There are other people involved. I have an office in Switzerland, a colleague in Switzerland, and I have a marketing department here and in Europe. So the business is multiple people. It's not just myself.
And what does working with you look like? If I came to you as a company that looks for best of preparation that we could get to enter the US market.
I'm very, very highly focused. We're down to business. This is an important decision made by a company, and it's very difficult to not expect something to happen without planning first. So I'm very meticulous in the detail, very frenetic actually when we get started in a business, so that the non-U.S. company has confidence that this is going to work out. So in the beginning, there's a lot of trust building through documentation, doing a SWOT analysis, as I mentioned earlier, about assessing the company's viability, and really answering the hard questions right up front before anything gets started. Are they willing to make this commitment? How long do they want to make the commitment? Is there funding for the commitment? Are there resources for the project? With those kind of questions answered in the beginning. So the beginning for me is a very, very discovery period where we learn what the company's strengths are and how well they want to work with the U.S., what their preferences are and their dislikes are at the same time. So there's a lot of learning back and forth, but very intense the first several months of a project.
So it's a lot of communication, a lot of
Yes.
talking. You have to figure out what the company looks like from the inside and then decide how to make that step.
Right. Mistakes can be timely, but mistakes can cost a company both resources and funding and time. And we don't have a lot of any of that, so we try and do the best we can right up front.
Of course. Okay. Now, if there is anyone that takes into consideration to enter the US market, but he knows he's not there yet, how can you prepare for ultimately taking that decision to come to you and say, hey, we want to do that?
It's in my hands at that point. And really what it's up to me to do is to tell them where they can go. If the technology is a fit, if it's a mismatch, where does it fit? Who's a competitor? What's the growth of the market? I do a lot of upfront preparation, quite a bit to help a company that's trying to decide. And many times that's how clients come from to me. Is I've done that preparation in advance and say, look, you can do this, but you will need to address these issues. But once they see that I'm not just over here, they're throwing a ball and I'm catching it, where I'm actually proactive and I'm actually helping them understand the market, they're much more comfortable working with me and working in the U.S. market. But in the beginning, I do a lot of the upfront work. It's part of the job, so to speak.
Very interesting. I like that attitude, to be honest. Many work relationships only start once the bill is paid. Um, to go a little bit up front, taking the first step yourself, is a great attitude, I think.
It builds what it does. It builds for multi-year relationships, which most of my clients are, and it starts off very harmoniously, and it stays that way. We don't have issues.
I can hear out that many companies that that work with you initially actually stayed for a longer period of time.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Most of them
Okay.
do.
So for anyone that got curious about what you do and what working with you looks like, where can they find you?
I am here outside of Dallas, Texas, and I welcome you anytime you would like to reach out to me. I'll give Constanta my email and phone number if you need to reach me. Even if you just have questions and you're curious, please do reach out to me. I have a lot of experience we haven't covered today, and it'd be good to talk to you, and maybe I can help you get your business going.
Great. To recap a little bit, preparation for US market entry is a lot of preparation. It is not a decision and a step you take from now to tomorrow. So taking things or considering things that have probably never been a topic is sometimes at the daily order. It is furthermore about allocating budget and other resources to the right way. So this step, which is very critical, is made successfully.
That's right. That's how
Thank you
it
so much
works.
for being here.
Thank you.
Is there any last call before we end this? Is there any last call you would like to address to these companies out there?
Our markets are growing. Come to the U.S. We can help you. We can answer questions. But there's a lot of opportunity in the U.S. and a lot of companies that are looking for new technology and looking for new partners. So please don't hesitate. It's worth looking into, and we'd love to talk to you if you have questions.
Okay. Thank you, William. All the best for your future.
Thank you very much, Konstantin.